Can we have an example where or how linear became circular? Frankly, when people are poor, they will always be easily manipulated and pin their hopes on handouts.
Yeah, and handouts are part of
And
that.
Liana says, but it's really demotivating when the community themselves won't see themselves as capable people and are stuck. Rebecca's question, can we have an example where or how linear became circular? Nick, do you have
Yes.
an answer to this question?
Oh, I think it's in front of all of us. Okay, so that example of water was really interesting. Okay, so in other words, in a circular economy, we have everything that we need to satisfy ourselves and to fulfill ourselves. Okay, but what happens? Okay, and in a circular economy, we don't need to buy it. It's there. We don't need money. So in other words, all of our labor and all of our land can be used for our own benefit and the benefit of our communities and the benefit of our families. Okay, but once water is commodified, then it becomes packaged, and then we have to buy it. Okay, and when we buy it, we need money, and when you need money, you have to give some of your labor, you have to give some of your land to the linear economy to get the small amount of money they give you to take it to the store and buy it. So that's how something that was once part of a circular economy, water, free for everybody, now becomes something that you have to buy at the store. And part of the reason why you have to buy it is because the logging companies, the mining companies have polluted our rivers. Okay, so in other words, we can't drink the water that we were able to drink before. So, but you could say the same thing about any commodity. You could say the same thing about rice. You could say, in other words, in a circular economy, people could grow their own rice. Okay, but now people have to go to the store to buy rice when they go into the linear economy. So there's all of you can see that in terms of the economics of things, but it's not just the economics of things. We can get into deeper or many other dimensions of economics. Okay, so think about education. Think about education. So in indigenous communities, who is the teacher? Who is a student? Who is a scientist? Who is a researcher? Who is a professor? Everybody's a student. Everybody's a teacher. Everybody's a professor. Everybody's a scientist, which means
Nick,
that knowledge and science belongs to everybody. But then what happens? The colonizers come and they set up a school, just like a bottle of water. It's in a package. It's in between four walls. Indigenous people's school is everywhere, all of the forest, all of the land, all of the sea. That's where people learn. And you never stop learning. You learn until you're 70, 80 years old. But no, in the schools that we establish, part of the colonial system, you have to come inside to learn the only one knowledge, the only one truth that only we know and that we give to you in a package. And when you prove to us that you believe in our one and only 95% blind truth, then we give you a paper that allows you to go out and tell other people what the truth is, instead of working with people so they get the confidence and power and sovereignty to believe in themselves enough to determine the truth in their own interest rather than somebody else's interest. So here you go from a circular education system to a linear education system. And then when you look at the linear system, it builds a triangle. So a whole bunch of kids come to school, but then as we go, more and more drop out. They're excluded until you get to the PhDs, the people at the top, the doctors, okay? And in other words, you've created a pyramid. And that means that one person can dominate everybody else. Everybody, the people at the bottom don't believe that they can know the truth. They have to ask the professor. They have to ask, they don't believe that they can determine what's good. They have to ask the priest. They have to ask the imam. They don't believe that they know the best technology. They have to go ask the expert from the university. See
Nick,
how the system works. Good. Okay.
Nick, so they're asking, what about the other way around? Is it possible to move from the linear to the circular? You've talked about moving from the circular to the linear.
Okay, and this was my other, okay, what Ilan, what you said was so important. So we go to communities today, even indigenous communities. even indigenous communities. Do you realize that in Melanesia, you have markets run by the women, traditionally run by the women, markets that are really part of the circular economy, because all of the money that the women make in those markets goes back to the whole community. So women play a very important role here. Men are more colonized than women in this way, and that's part of the patronage. That colonization of men's minds into the linear economy is part of the patronage system, so that men begin to believe that the linear system is better than the circular system. But even the women in the markets in Melanesia, you'll find some women with fish that's worth like $20,000 in Japan. Or there's some fish in Melanesia, like tuna fish, that are worth into the millions of dollars. A woman will be sitting in the market. She'll sell the fish for like nothing. She'll sell the fish for like $5 US, then take the $5 and go to the store and buy the rubbish fish in the tin fish, which in Japan is the food that they used to feed their pussycats, their cats and dogs. You see, so you go to a village like Ilan said, and you'll see people, even people who still have so much indigenous sovereignty, but they're still becoming addicted. They still repeat these patterns of linear economy and linear patronage. Okay, but so in other words, Ilan, I don't want to say that this doesn't exist. I acknowledge what you're saying, and it's true. But think about it. What I'm talking about now is not about taking indigenous people and turning them into some kind of ideal, turning them into heroes. Okay, this is not about heroes. Because if you really, okay, Western science and colonization has different ways to become blind and to become deaf. Okay, one way is to pretend it doesn't exist. So what if you did it, if you do something, if you accomplish something like your ancestors accomplished this wonderful Pacific, trans-Indian Ocean trading net there, and valorize it, say that this is something important that we can learn from it, and then put it all together. And that's what I see you doing at Forever Sabah. You're already doing that. So in other words, many of you are living in the money system, okay? But you have all of your ingenious ways to raise children, all your ingenious ways to live as healthy as possible, all your ingenious ways that you do to create life in a system of death. But you're working with indigenous peoples as well, who have a lot of other very important things to teach us about how to do that too. So in other words,
Nick,
to me, the answer is there. Okay, that's the road to the future, and I'm totally hopeful. I'm so hopeful because I see people like you doing what you're doing.
Okay, now take a few breaths. Please tell us more about using the power of language to inspire meaningful change in the community. Or language to help people regain power.
Yeah. Okay, excellent question. Okay, and this is what we meant by reading and writing life. In other words, reading your life and writing your life. Okay, and so it's a kind of literacy, reading and writing, but it has to do with life rather than books. Okay, and I think a lot of you are already doing this. So in other words, what do you do when you read your life? You're trying to figure out the reasons why you think the way you do, the reasons why you speak the way you do, the reasons why you act the way you do. It's a kind of reading. It's about language, but it goes deeper than language because language also determines a lot of the ways that we think and act. So using language as a way to get a handle on this process, you can use language in this way. Okay, language to promote reading, critical reading, getting people to actually start to understand why they're being paid the price that they're being paid for their kernel, their palm oil kernel. Why the government is promoting the native title, but it's not promoting the native rights proclamation and Sabah land ordinance. In other words, why are things happening the way they are? Because, and once you start to look at it and people start to read it, to try to figure out what's behind it, you start to see that the colonization is stronger than ever. Okay, once people start to realize that this thing, okay, the materials used in this thing are made from is made from the slave labor. I'm talking about slave labor of people in Africa who have to mine the minerals that are being stolen from the ground. The environment is completely destroyed. And the people who assemble this thing are women who are being treated like slaves in factories, mostly in Asia. Okay, the slavery has gotten so bad for these women that they have to put nets outside the windows on the upper stories so the women don't commit suicide. That's how bad the exploitation is, how much their labor is being stolen. In other words, when we start to read these things, we don't just pick up our cell phone, we pick up our cell phone and we see what's behind this cell phone. There's slave labor of people in Africa. There's slave labor of women in Asia behind this cell phone. And then when we see what this cell phone is doing to us, who is our slave driver now? It's this thing and this computer. We're all slaves to this now. In other words, when we start to read our lives, get behind the language, start to understand what's behind this thing, what's behind this computer, we're starting to take control of writing the book of your life, take control of that language. And what that means is taking control over or first of all, opening your eyes, realizing the powers here, and then assuming that sovereignty, that indigenous type of sovereignty over your land, your labor, the way you live your life. You can do it right now and here. You don't have to wait for the revolution to come or for somebody to tell you, yeah, it can happen right here and now because you have the power right here, okay? You don't have to wait for the professor from the university to tell you, you do it now, or the politician to say, now's the time to do it. You can do it right here and now. And that's what I admire about Forever Sabah. You're doing it, okay? But that's how you can use language. Language to encourage people to read what's going on in their lives, find out the meaning, find out what's behind it, how there's other people using them to get rich off of their labor and their land. And then have people start to take back control over that text, that language, and start to take control over their lives, take back control over their land and their labor, etc. And this is where I think indigenous peoples have a lot to teach us, but also we have a lot to teach ourselves about how we actually do that from day to day. All of these survival systems that we have. So when I see people doing all these things, these amazing things in their day-to-day lives, that is powerful, but we just don't give ourselves permission to see it or value it. We think that's just what I do. The real thing is in the university. They know how to do stuff. I don't know how to do stuff. That's the attitude we have towards ourselves. But you have so much knowledge. You've accumulated so many amazing technologies and ways to get around all of the obstacles that the linear economy and the politics of patronage have been putting in our way to make so that we can seek life in a system that seeks death.
Okay, Ilan wants to say something, Nick. And then you can close.
I've had this problem, and I talked about it today in the afternoon sharing session, and I got a revelation tonight, so I just want to share it because I ended on a negativity in this afternoon session where I've got a real problem with the language in the Malaysian context of the word indigenous and our word for it, which is orang asal. And I have such a problem with these words. And I realized tonight that it's because they've been taken over and the very words have been kind of re-owned by somebody else, and they don't mean what I mean. So that those words are not good enough for me anymore in our context. Because in Malaysia we have the Melayu, China, India. I don't want to be the orang asal box with the stereotype of feathers in my hair and reduced to this stereotype kind of cosplay. And I realized that a lot of the language that we use in the the mainstream way in Malaysia, when we talk about all your citizen science and all that, we don't talk about indigenous knowledge. We talk about the science that you're talking about, right? But we don't recognize, so that when I hear the word indigenous, most of the time, it's in the Malayu, China, India stereotype with feathers in the hair. And I realized, so I'm really grateful tonight of this great uncomfortable feeling that I've had with this language of the word indigenous and the word orang asal. But I realize now it's not the meaning of the perjuangan, of the battle and the fight, it's how it's been reduced. So I just want to say thank you for making me think about how I'm reacting to language that has been shaped by something, by the very system that I want to criticize, has made me question that language, even the word indigenous itself. And I don't know if you want to talk about that word indigenous and a kind of cosplay that we see and the kind of the way it's been, because there is a global movement, which is really important. A lot of the time, that language that I see in social media makes me cringe, in all honesty. But I don't quite know why. But maybe you can help explain why I get such a negative reaction to that word. And also the word First Nations. Although I understand it, I don't like the word. So I don't want that to be a negative thing. It's part of my process of understanding. It's not the perjuangan I'm criticizing, it's the way the word is used in the Malaysian context and how to reshape that word. Yeah.
I think, Ilan, this is so important. And we talk about this a lot, but we really talk about this a lot, indigeneity, because like you said, the word indigenous has been hijacked by the colonial system in many cases. Okay, so especially in a place like what is conceptualized as the Malaysian Federation or Malaysia. So yeah, and on top of that, indigenous people are very dangerous, because indigenous people are some of the few people left in the world who are still, who still have that power over land and labor that most of the rest of the world has lost. Okay, so that means that indigenous people are dangerous because indigenous people can remind all of us that all of us used to have that. Even the people in Europe, go back enough thousand years, they had it too. They had, nobody was stealing their land. Nobody was stealing their labor. The land belonged to everybody. Everybody's labor went to benefit everybody. Okay, so in other words, there's a reason why they like to promote the feathers. They like to promote all of this stuff and say, okay, well, indigenous people are like in a museum. That's the museum indigenous. And unfortunately, Ilan, it gets worse because even the United Nations, which is trying to promote indigenous interests in some way, they don't allow indigenous people to define indigeneity. So the definition of indigeneity that I use is the one that I learned from Maori. So it's brilliant that part of your family is from New Zealand. In other words, the Maori were very, very important in educating the world about the part of indigeneity that is the most dangerous. It's the part about sovereignty, because sovereignty is what you lose when you get domesticated. And so to me, indigenous people are all over the world. Some of them are still living those ancestral ways where they have sovereignty over their land, they have sovereignty over their labor. You go to Vanuatu, we'll talk about that in the session tomorrow morning, but they still have that. And that's really dangerous because we may all get reminded by those people that we could all have that too. But there are other indigenous people whose land has been invaded, who's to such a degree that they have very limited sovereignty over land. And so they're still indigenous though, because they still claim that sovereignty over land. Okay. So in other words, it's about that power and the claim of that power. Non-indigenous people are the people who have forgotten that power, forgotten that they could as well have that kind of sovereignty. And so, so to me, that definition of sovereignty that comes from indigenous people themselves, like the Maori, or the way that that sovereignty is practiced in places like Vanuatu or West Africa, that has educated me to adopt a different definition of sovereignty. And I think that that's really been very helpful to me. That's a big thing that I learned. And then what I learned from that as well is that we can all reclaim that sovereignty, and we can all reclaim that indigeneity, because all of our ancestors were indigenous. No matter how far you, in your particular family, you as an individual have fallen into the colonial system or linear economies, et cetera, we can all reclaim that. We can all reclaim that in 1,000 different ways. So it's not about saying, oh, you have to wear these feathers to be indigenous, or you have to have this particular relationship to that land to be indigenous. No, it's more about reconnecting with that sovereignty, reclaiming that sovereignty, first of all, recognizing the sovereignty that's there, and the power that all of us have as individuals and as communities, and then valorizing it, that is saying, okay, this is important, this is really important. And thirdly, assuming it, making it part of the way you think, the way you speak, and the way you act.
We all can claim that sovereignty, and we, all of us, even it had run like many generations ago, that we have that indigenous blood flowing in us. And as I know, it has created a lot of conflict within, because many of us are also colonized. Our thinking, and even the word indigenous has been used, and we are now thinking in that linear way of life, the way we went to school. But I think this is a journey. Thank you for the sharing tonight. We'll see you tomorrow morning. We'll wake up early morning for that, and I don't think we can sleep. We'll think. And I guess to everyone, maybe Cynthia would say final word. Oh no. So, terima kasih. Good night.
Good night. Hugs to everybody. Virtual hugs.
Yeah.
Yeah, virtual hugs.
Yeah, virtual hugs.
And sleep well. Get some good rest. And we'll see you in the morning, which will be the evening here. So in any case, thank you so much. And I hope that next time that there will be more. Maybe when if I ever have a chance to go there, we'll have a chance to do this in a more interactive way. But in any case, thank you for sharing all the things that you've already shared, and it's really helped me, and I've learned a lot, and I'm filling up my basket.